have that good? 1 on a scale of 10.
Live. Okay, we are back live this morning, our Senate Transportation Committee, and we're going to continue our discussion with the Agency of Transportation on many subjects. They've covered a lot of different subjects in the last few days, but now we're going to switch to Ross McDonald, Public Transit Manager, and that's always an interesting subject for the folks to hear. So Ross, welcome, and thank you for coming, and tell us a little something about what you want to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and share the screen. It's popped up right here.
I think you're right. It is 1.
You get a deal.
Okay.
Kids don't like it, they've sat around for a little bit.
Okay, here we go.
Well, thank you. Again, Ross McDonald, Public Transit Program Manager, and talking about the budget today, many of the same slides and information, just putting a number to a lot of these activities. And here we go.
I saw electric bus this morning. Goes across Montpelier, and I see that Interstate was there. What do they get for mileage? I mean, they put a couple of hours, or I mean, how many miles they get
For the electric buses?
Yeah.
Depending on the conditions,
Right,
certainly,
right.
but 160 to 185, almost pushing
They
200.
got a lot of heat under heat or air conditioning.
The HVAC can be a 30% draw on that battery.
Wow.
And so insulated cabins, lighter componentry, all those things are trying to be incorporated into the construction of those vehicles now. And so many of those vehicles also have a diesel heater on top so that it doesn't drain the battery to such an
The
extent.
backup plan for that.
Yeah, and that certainly takes from the greenhouse gas reductions that we calculate, but there isn't a better option right now. Although the Latendas that we're looking at from the Ontario, from the Montreal area, they have built up with heat pumps and with the insulated cabins. They feel like they wouldn't need auxiliary heating until it gets to about 5 above or something. So only a few days a year would we have to fire that up, and it's getting better every year.
So when the bus comes back, I'm sorry, we're getting another question, but when the bus comes back, they have to immediately plug it in and get recharged if it's coming monthly or back and forth.
It can go back and forth a few times a day, and hours of operation can be 8 hours, depending on mileage and those types of things. In the evening, off peak, is when we try to charge these things. Absolutely.
Well, you want to do that, but you don't want fast charge. They do not recommend that. You routinely use fast charge of batteries.
The charging infrastructure has contributed to at least half of the down days of our electric fleet at this point. We didn't really see that coming as we looked at our initial projections. So we're redoubling our efforts on the charging procurement and looking for better case studies and better assurances. But that's where we are. And yes, you can set it so that it's not fast charge, but over, let's say, 5 hours and not 15. And so there are those that latitude that they have. The key is not to pay those peak rates and to have those negotiated rates with the utility, and those are being done as
I don't think I ever could survive with an electric vehicle. No, I'd be so nervous when we're running on it.
You don't go very far. You're not taking.
No, I know, but you've got to plan ahead all the time. You fill your car down, it says how many you got.
I know. You got range anxiety.
Yeah, I would.
Well, I could send
would
you a
know.
bill
Yeah.
for that diagnosis.
Yeah, you got towed for a week.
I did. Well, my son did.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sure, no.
Carried away.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So the budget of approximately $48 million consists of the following fund revenues sources. Those FHWA flex funds coming from our bridge and highway section to the transit budget represents a higher percentage of the total public transit budget than any other rural state. It's critical for us to sustain the services that we have, and we certainly need to recognize the importance of that. Those FTA formula funds, that's generally what most people use in other states for their public transit services. And as you can see, we are only accounting for about 20% of the total budget with those formula funds. state funds at about a $9 million projected budget for FY24 represents 18 plus percentage. And we're drawing down the remaining of our COVID relief funds and trying to project the competitive funds that will be drawn down in that next successive fiscal year, as we'll receive dollars, but it may take 18 months or 2 years to get the capital in place or the bus delivered. And so as a result, that's something we've talked a little bit about, making our best estimates. As you can see, we have our fixed routes, our deviated fixed routes, demand response services. That infrastructure and that software supports the NEMT program, the non-emergency medical transportation program for Medicaid clients. And we also have our GoVermont program, of which we'll talk about in just a moment.
The preview slide is blocking.
How's that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll talk a little bit about the reports and studies. Certainly wanted to share an opportunity to come back and talk about our zero fare assessment and the others. Talk a little bit about what we've done with the GoVermont program to sustain the MTI Transportation Demand Management Program. We'll look at revisit the microtransit pilots and put a number on that. And again, remind you of our electric transit vehicles and what we're doing to address costs. The zero fare study and analysis has gotten quite a bit of attention. I was on Vermont Edition last Tuesday. This morning on the phone with VT Digger, just trying to figure out, what the impacts are and what the importance of fare revenue represents in both urban and rural, which are quite disparate. We, every 5 years, are required to do an intercity assessment to identify gaps and needs. And I'm happy to report that over 80% of all of our residents in the state are within 20 miles of an intercity bus route, which gets you to the national network. Our route performance report is something we do every year, and generally we can present that along with the zero fare study. There's some crossover. It's really cost per passenger, revenue trends, activities and operations. I pulled the slide to share with you a little bit earlier. And that core budget dashboard is just a new tool that I'm using with Vermont Public Transit Association members to identify where the cost increases are coming from, what we can do about them. And we have a cost or a budget committee form that is trying to name and speak to and address the cost increases that we were able to talk about a little bit earlier. But the GoVermont program is really a one-click, one-call clearinghouse for all non-single occupancy vehicle.
$905.
$905,000 includes.
You're missing the zero.
You're missing a zero there.
Oh.
I thought it was pretty cheap, $905.
Yeah.
That's a comma.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
I saw that. I said, oh,
Presented that yesterday and didn't catch it then either. My apologies. That is a $905,000
okay.
total, and that does include our FTI program I'll speak to. But we offer van pool programs for businesses and employees. Ride sharing, we had over 5,000 matches in 2022 as people were getting back to work. We've seen more activity with our automated carpool matching than in the past.
I have to say one thing that supplements this is Front Porch Forum. It's amazing the number of people. I need a ride to Dartmouth. I need a ride, and then they thank and they say, thanks, you've taken care of it. So it's interesting how that communication system that's very neighborhood almost specific is being used to.
Front porch, right?
Yeah. Front Porch Forum? You don't have that?
I don't know what it is. You sit on your front porch?
No, you belong to it, and it's a communication.
You're in that too, Gene?
Yeah, I'm on Front Porch Forum, and I'm
You spend
on.
all your time on computer, you said.
No, let me tell you, I've got plenty of things I'm dealing with. Like,
Front Porch Forum is a community listserv so that neighbors can post information activity.
I got this for sale. I got this to give away.
Coffee for breakfast.
Missing
Again,
chickens.
yeah, chickens, right? Hats. It's amazing.
But the mobility requests, Senator, is something I think we get the same Front Porch Forum because of our communities that we share. And many times I'll see somebody looking for that trip and we'll speak to them, say, are you aware of our elderly and persons with disability program? Hey, if you're looking to go every day to Montpelier, there's a carpool matching service and the US 2 commuter. So that person who's looking for the trip to Boston and said, oh, please, I'm all set. I have backups too.
Yeah, I
That was
know.
just recently, and they didn't need any of our services because the community, came up and saved us quite a bit of money, but they could have been eligible for the services that we provide. So we do use and advertise on Front Porch Forum for our volunteer drivers, for new services, surveys. We put a survey out for public transit and we can get thousands of responses. In the past, we get a few hundred. So those are the ways that we're using Front Porch Forum as well.
And then you've got vital communities that are in, for example, Bradford and Reigate and so forth. So you have different variations of Front Porch Forum.
It was interesting to see that they were up there first and have maintained that listserv in the Upper Valley. And Front Porch Forum has kind of replicated that throughout the state. We have our transit app again, just telling folks where their bus is and when they can expect it. The Mobility and Transportation Innovation Grant was started 3 years ago by the legislature. We were initially provided $500,000 in funds. And over the last couple of years, I've worked with the GoVermont program manager, Dan Currier, to use FHWA funds as part of his budget and move away from program support, which GoVermont had started doing, to project support with many of those same organizations. But we're now putting together a return on investment portfolio and snapshot. So if you'd like us to come in to talk about their TDM projects that we're supporting, e-bike lending, libraries, feasibility studies for microtransit and other efforts to help people access. You can see the hub and spoke image showing, different ride share and telecommunications.
They dropped that in Burlington, right? They went out of business, the bicycle ride share. Or
that one did. You can
see at the mall, they used to have 10 bikes or so. Now they're everything's gone. They went out of business or something.
They did. The company went out of business, and Local Motion has filled the gap a little bit because they provide bike rentals from their facility just down on Steel Street. And Local Motion is also part of a e-bike lending library and bringing their e-bikes around to different communities so that people can go and try them and see, does this work for me? Can I, save money? Can avoid buying a second or third car if we have this other option? It's been interesting to see moving from the recreational use of bikes to utility use of bikes. We're supportive of these things. These bikes can save us quite a bit of money in terms of accessing our service and providing more access to people who may be more than a few miles away from a bus stop. If they're 5 miles away, an e-bike is a pleasure to get there.
As this grows, I'm concerned about the safety, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, come up with some thoughts about, because electric bikes are going to be very popular, but we have no program for safety. I'll bring it up today, but I really want to dig to the bottom of that and come up with something, because we got to address that issue. Just there's going to be more electric bikes, and that's great. Nothing wrong with that. But on the other hand, there's got to be some program that addresses the safety.
Absolutely. And being on Lamoille Valley, seeing some of these e-bikes coming past me faster than
That's right.
you would expect
That's correct.
is certainly something that
I brought it up a year ago. I didn't get anywhere with it. Local Motion was not cooperative. And so I put it down. They said there was no issue with safety. So I'm going to try. I hope this committee goes on with it, trying to get some sort of a safety program in place that we can help. Yes.
Ross, can you remind us on the classes of the electric bikes you have? Or is that not something you deal with?
It's not something that I deal with other than personally with my own class 3 electric bike that needs to, you can set different electric bikes for 20 miles an hour, 28 miles an hour. And when you're riding on the bike paths, you should not be in a class 3 bike. You need to not exceed that 20-mile-an-hour governor, if you will. But I shouldn't be speaking about this program, I think.
I would say that we had a new eye on the Mohawk Valley Rail Trail. Nathaniel said somebody actually had a dog sled.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they were using it to, you know,
Like a person in a sled or something.
yeah, just like, with Huskies.
Oh, really?
And obviously you had the fat bikes,
Mhm.
but that was the first time we'd seen actually a musher on the trail.
Nice and flat, that makes a lot of sense. Huh.
You gotta wait.
Training for the Iditarod, I guess.
Right. Right.
Okay, go ahead.
So, yeah, and so Bill Vermont and Dan Courier can come in and speak about this program. The good news is we have found a way to sustain these activities at these levels with fewer state dollars. And that's the key. And when we look at the budget, you'll see the state dollars associated with the Bill Vermont program. As we talked about microtransit service, it's just something we continue to study. Right now, we have our 5 new pilots that have been funded, and they're in different steps in implementing microtransit. The Windsor model just started this week, and with the weather, it's been a slow start, which has been a nice soft launch. The software is working correctly. The outreach to the community is on pace, and these other areas will be starting in the coming months. You can see the disparate communities, whether it's Barrie, first mile, last mile to get to the service, Morrisville replacing a small circulator route with just 1 bus, Middlebury replacing a more robust in-town circulator system, and Windsor, no service at all, but we do have quite a bit of demand response associated with essential services for the elderly and persons with disability. Can we open that type of those vehicles up for the general public for more purposes?
I'm concerned that this is competition with private enterprise like Uber and Lyft and a local taxi service. I don't know, do you even have one still? And yes, you do in Burlington, right?
Fenway's, but
Fenway's still there?
I think
Is anybody there?
they effectively switched over to a new model where they have, and you know this better than I, but I think it's just a coordinated group of Uber drivers. That's
Yeah,
what it is.
it's not that way.
That's my understanding, and Uber and Lyft doesn't exist in these areas to any degree. In Rutland, on the weekend, some people do come from a field and turn on their Uber and Lyft accounts, but it's not such a service model that it needs to be considered at this point in Vermont. The concerns are cost, general usage, and the best fit for microtransit. And we don't know. And I'm part of a Transportation Research Board, a group with North Carolina and Michigan presenting on our efforts in rural areas. And we're finding the same strengths and weaknesses. Overall, it's worth it. And we feel like over the next 3 years, we'll have a much better idea of how microtransit fits into our services. We already have the on-demand service for demand response, the NEMT program, Medicaid, and our E&D program. So is it time to bring those together in more real-time services through microtransit models, or are the efficiencies that we're able to receive through scheduling and dispatch with 24, 48 hours notice so meaningful cost-wise that we're better off to maintain to provide more trips under that approach. So there's a lot of case studies and pilots going out there. I don't know if any other state's doing 5 rural pilots like Vermont is.
And the Barrie one, is that the same as the caps? That's the capstone, or is the what capstone is doing different than that?
It's going to be part of the trips that we're providing however and wherever we are. And so we're going to start off with Capstone providing a level of the NEMT and elderly and persons with disability program. And then once we launch the microtransit service, we certainly expect that they would receive those tablets and be able to provide a certain level of those trips, if not all of them.
They're proposing just to use cars instead of vans or buses, right?
Or they were thinking they could also lease a van from GMT with their drivers and for that wheelchair accessible requirement. But right now, even if we're buying vans for microtransit, they are ADA accessible.
So why are they going through Capstone versus through GMT?
GMT is, my understanding, will have a sub-grant or subcontract.
Someone, it is, so there's a coordination there. Yeah.
Yeah, like Cider, the coordination is key. And we're really working with Capstone to ensure they're using the same dispatch and software or dispatch and scheduling software that we're all sharing that support the
That's my
efficiencies.
concern is how that, you know, because you don't want to be developing parallel systems.
Exactly. I was speaking with one of the members at CarShare who has been working with us for years, Peter Jonke, and he said, I like more options. And I said, of course you do, but more options with the same dollars could prevent us from being as efficient as possible. There may be a way forward. We're likely to study because a Cider model comes into play. They also have that sub-recipient agreement similar to what Capstone's going to have. We'd like to study the impacts and the viability of doing more of those types of third-party contract for services. A great example is a contract that's just signed in Bennington with the local fire department. They're on call. They don't have a lot going on in some instances in most days. And so they are now providing those demand response trips after hours and in the evening to get people from the hospital to their homes for a very competitive rate. That needs
In
to
the
be
police vehicle, I mean, in the fire apparatus,
in fire
if they have a truck.
in their own vehicles or in the fire department vehicles, and also GMT is or GMCN, Green Mountain Community Network in Bennington, is offered to provide them with some vehicles at the end of the day, drop off a sedan or two. There's not a lot of activity there, but when Terrence, their general manager, was talking about this, you can imagine we were wondering, like, how could we replicate that, and could that be a way forward? Another opportunity for us to study, and we'll put a scope together in the next few weeks, working with Cider. There's a new general manager there,
Yes,
Jordan.
yes.
Um,
Very effective in the islands. They run the whole island. Excellent service for elderly or appointments or shopping or just a fantastic organization.
Absolutely. And so with Jordan and the GMCN, Capstone, what is our options moving forward? Does it all have to be with the provider? It all has to be coordinated through the provider. That is the key.
But other than that, central coordination, they're trying different things, like what Barry's Capstone is doing different than what Montpelier tried, and that's in Manchester, Rutland, or Windsor, doing little differences, and you can learn from what works and what doesn't.
That's exactly our approach. And when we think about us saying denying a trip because it's after hours, it's on the weekend, so we don't have the capacity, Capstone can address all of that with alternative funds and use the funds that they're receiving from our services to really stand up and provide that foundation. That's the vision, and we're monitoring that very closely to see at the end of the day, did we save some money, or would we be better off working with Capstone to coordinate these services rather than stand up and help stand up another organization with their own infrastructure. The transit app, again, 75% plus of people who ride the bus regularly have this on their smartphones and are using it. And it also includes a survey at the end. How was the bus ride? Was it clean? Was it too crowded? Those types of real-time feedback from the riders is about the most important information we can receive to assess our services. About $18,000 a year to make this available for free for everybody on our $48 million budget. And it's something that we plan to continue to invest in. We could offer it and have people pay $4 or $5 a month or so, but in a way to introduce it and to maintain equity and providing it equally to everybody, whether or not they can or can't afford it. That's been the approach over the last few years.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is a nationwide product that we're using here in Burlington, Vermont, and this product Transit, are they using the same app elsewhere in the country to also collect and pay fees to ride and take the bus? Not for the app, but in fact to pay the fee to take the bus.
And so if there was a payment app, Transit would include that in their information. And so it wouldn't be you paying through Transit, you'd be accessing payment through the Transit app to another site. Generally speaking, several hundred, maybe thousand cities are using the Transit app. If you go to Montreal and you've already got the app, if you're in Barcelona, it says, oh, which bus are you going to take? It doesn't know that you're a Vermonter. It just knows that you have the app in this geo-fenced area. Those e-buses, that's the Latenda that we talked about. That is building lighter componentry, trying to insulate the cabin, and dialing this out to extend the range and usefulness, and really deal with that HVAC draw that we see. As I mentioned, they have not entered the U.S. market and plan to do so through the Vermont recent award. We've been up to that facility. We've driven the bus. When I say we, people with actual CDL licenses can from Marble Valley. And so far, so good. We're working with the FTA to ensure that all of their requirements are in place by America, the safety measures, those types of things. So this is what constitutes excitement for us, and we're excited to be helping Latenda bring a better vehicle to the market. Right now, most of the electric buses are concentrating on the larger vehicles, and 70% of our vehicles are the smaller cutaways. This is a hybrid, but this is a 7 to 12-year bus, and we're not interested in buying electric buses.
Why do they call them a cutaway?
Well, because they actually take the chassis and cut it and attach the cabin. And so it really is a manufacturing term where they're taking an existing vehicle and cutting away the cabin area and reattaching their own cabin. But yeah, I mean, it's shorter.
Interesting. Sometimes we hear these terms of like, well, what does it really mean?
Yeah,
Where do they come from?
Exactly. And I wasn't sure when I came in either, and but that was the explanation.
And that's
so
why you look into the roof rather than being able to see the road.
that's right. Yeah. And other cutaway models have different specs for us to consider. And there's no shortage of options for diesel and gas. And we do have several of those class vehicles being tested through the FTA Altoona process. But nothing has come out. But when that does, we have a backlog of orders ready to go for that classification.
The bus cost, the electric bus versus a regular diesel bus.
This bus, that class size would be about 375, 400, trying to take these in. The electric bus, 700. And when we look at 12-year life cycles and lube oil filter savings, gas costs, depending on where those are going to be, we're still looking at maybe $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 more at the end of that period, but it's not $400,000 more.
So the batteries are guaranteed for 12 years, as they say, or?
We're purchasing warranties with those.
That's what the big cost. They say the batteries are very expensive.
Exactly. We're and Gillig, which is a very large provider and maybe one of the foremost large vehicle providers, just delivered 2 vehicles to Advanced Transit in Wilder, Vermont. And one of those wasn't operating correctly. They pulled the battery, and it's in Albany now being fixed. That's all under the warranty work. And but that was a disappointing piece, because Gillig makes up the majority of our larger vehicles. And we thought the gold standard, when Gillig has an electric bus, that will be when my predecessor would be more comfortable entering the electric market. And we're 1 for 2 so far with our 2 deliveries.
And 20 years from now, they'll laugh with these buses. They'll laugh with electric. They'll say, you only got 200 miles, we're getting 800 miles.
You might have nitrogen, you might have different fuel types.
The hydrogen,
I mean, hydrogen,
yeah.
not nitrogen, hydrogen.
well, the hydrogen piece is interesting in that I've been able to take part in these conferences and webinars. And our folks at AECOM who provided us with the electrification study asked us about hydrogen and looked at our infrastructure for delivering hydrogen. And they said, oh, this isn't North Jersey with colonial pipelines and everything that could be shut down and filled with hydrogen. And so we would have to look at that infrastructure build out a little differently than other areas that they've looked at, like Washington, D.C. comes to mind. But it is something that they keep sending me articles and saying, like,
We
look
get
at here.
emails from some entity.
Some guy impeach him. Something awesome.
No, this is hydrogen, no.
That's Jack Hill.
Yes. How do you know?
I built his electric bike when he ordered it.
I see.
And Jack is a frequent member of the cafe crowd that's run by my friend.
Uh-huh.
But yes, Jack and I have been talking. I've been disciplining Jack for 15 years anyway.
You live in that.
I do
He
live
wants
in-
to teach him, as does John.
Right, territory.
Yeah,
Yeah, when I said I've done live for Peachum, I didn't mean Rob.
Yeah.
that's why I had to throw that in. And I was Rob Ide's carpool partner for 5
Oh,
years
really?
when he was
He
working at the
came up, I
agency.
seen him at Thanksgiving, he ordered a raw fresh turkey from me, so he drove to Rutland and pick him up. from my
Oh,
store.
wow.
And so I had a chance with
He
him.
wrote 2 commuters and didn't
Yeah.
pay. And
Yeah,
that
right,
didn't-
that's
he
right.
didn't like that.
You just pay $1 or something. for it.
That's right.
Right.
Oh, he was able to pay the
80
50%
cents, yeah.
because of.
Yeah, right, yeah.
State employees.
We used to joke with him all the time, one fucking charge.
To join state government and to have Rob Ide as a carpool person, I'm just so fortunate. He gave me the full background on so many issues.
Oh, he's a great guy. I enjoyed working
That's
with
the
him.
benefit of riding the bus. You get to talk to other people. And you can I had a lot of good conversations when I used to ride that bus.
Absolutely.
But
So
recently, I've noticed canceled.
for your.
Yeah, like I get a
ride-
notice that like the Route 2 commuter is not gonna run or, so that's, I mean, as you know, that's the main problem why people don't wanna ride the bus, because it's fine if it's always there, but the day they're sitting in the snow and it's like, oh, it's
Or
gonna be
it's like
2
Joe
hours.
Benning, who didn't realize the last run stopped in Marshfield.
Yeah, like people that's happened probably more than once.
Then he lived in Lindenville.
You,
He had
Roger,
slight
take the
problems.
bus from your place?
I saw one once.
If that happened to you once. then you're
Bigfoot
never
was
gonna ride
driving
it
it.
again.
Russ took a picture of it. Look at
Bigfoot
this.
was driving it.
It wasn't uncommon to have service cancellations due to driver
Right, yeah,
shortages.
it's not
And
their fault, but.
well, I am happy to say that our providers, other than GMT, have been able to fully staff. There are new
School bus
driver
drivers,
contracts.
Everything, everybody, oh my God.
And GMT has a new executive director.
Yes, Clayton Clark has just joined a few weeks ago.
Be at the Veterans Office. in
Yeah,
the state.
they said he did a wonderful job there.
Yeah, he was highly regarded. And then he went to, I think, to be a director of a residential care facility.
He worked at Oak Rehab with my peer, Tim Bradshaw's brother, Q Bradshaw. And so we were able to ask a little bit about him, but he's been really wonderful in our initial conversations, and that allows their outgoing general manager to really focus on operations, and that's what we need at GMT.
Clayton, we were talking, and he was the one who knew the name of Alexander the Great's horse. Hmm. Anybody know what it is? Bucephalus.
Wow.
Mhm. I don't know, he was coming up, and he said, oh, I know the name. And I said, yeah, but I don't know. That's a bit of arcane knowledge that I'll never have any use for. But Clayton happened to know the answer. So anyway, it was nice to see that he had taken over. Challenging job, certainly.
He seems very positive and pragmatic, and that's what we need in that position. Comfortable to do all of the outreach and coordination with the towns as the authority. Really looking forward to seeing what that's going to mean for GMT. Once we get back to the slides, I did want to just point out our partnership with the Agency of Human Services. We know that for many years we've been doing the Elders and Persons with Disability program, but through our participation on opioid councils and working with voc rehab and higher ability, we decided together to use a pilot and use those funds to identify if we can increase the eligibility trips to those who are in recovery and may not be eligible otherwise for trips to counseling and group sessions and those types of things. And also for job access, if you can't get to a job because your car's broken or you don't have a carpool yet, we will provide trips to and from work for up to 2 weeks, usually 1 week. But we just want to get them there, talking with an HR person about carpools, getting them a paycheck to fix their car or to put a down payment on a car, those types of things, understanding that we don't have transit services to every employer. That's been successful, and that is being conducted at a 50% federal dollars and 50% non-Fed. And we are splitting the non-federal with the Agency of Human Services through an interdepartment transfer that comes into us. That's the type of partnership that we're proud of, and it's an extension of what we already do with the Department of Vermont Health Access with their Medicaid program. So rather than putting on more fixed routes that may not make sense because we've covered many of the dense areas and the heavily trafficked corridors, but is it really trying to identify more needs through this demand response with better technology, microtransit? That's really where this pilot is, and we're extending this for the foreseeable future into FY24.
That's good to hear. Now, I see Jamie's here, but, and actually I had a conversation this morning with a commissioner because the Medicaid reimbursement, which is not inconsequential, it's $15 million, comes through to support non-emergency medical transportation. Because anyone who's through Medicaid, there's a requirement that if you have a car but you can't get to the doctor or you can't get to, to the medical service, so there's an access requirement. And back in the 80s, that's how long it's been in place. It used to be a kind of a separate run program, and the decision was made, I was part of that, so I know, is to see about braiding the funding so that we were using those Medicaid access requirement dollars to help support our public transit infrastructure, which was already doing the E&D, elderly and disabled, which is through a different federal funding source. And back at that point, there was like a loading fee per individual per ride. But the methodology that's currently in place is not working for the transit agent. And I'm bringing it up because you may hear it, and you're going to hear it tomorrow. Caleb Grant's coming in for RCT, and there's acknowledgement that there's that the current methodology is problematic, and it's actually causing the transit agencies to provide this service at a loss, which they can't. They aren't funded to do. So there's a 6-month sort of agreement bridge until we can get it figured out. And they require more Medicaid or state match, depending on how we work it out, to address the shortfall. But they have been looking at the finances of the transit agencies, and they recognize that there's some real problems with the current. So I'm only bringing it up to let you know that it's under active discussion. Ultimately, it may mean that they change the reimbursement, because what you get is reimbursement for someone, and it's a standard. So if someone has to go to Boston, the cost of providing that travel is very expensive. Or someone who's a very heavy user, if they're having to go to dialysis or sometimes cancer treatment or whatever, and the reimbursement is, set regardless of the frequency, and so the utilization numbers are up. And so I'm just using this because you're talking about the collaboration, but that's a minor amount compared to the 15 million going into the system. So,
As I just texted Casey, it just said, it's time for my tutorial. So I'm gonna sit with him on a Monday, I think, and,
well, he wants to meet with you. Caleb?
Caleb, I mean, he had asked to meet with me before, and I just haven't been able to put it in, but it's time.
Well, he was here at the State House.
Go, and I think your speakers are turned on. If you turn your speakers on.
So anyway, I just want to use this as a chance to brief people on other discussions that are going on. And I just met with the commissioner this morning around the work that's underway, and certainly they're well aware of it, and hopefully we can work out a solution. But ultimately it comes down to, if you're not paying enough and they don't have the money to underwrite loss, you got to figure out a methodology, and it usually costs a bit more to address it.
And if we can continue to show that our approach is as efficient as we can expect, that is part of the discussion too, I'm aware. And every few years it is an issue, and it has been really nice to see that DEVA and our public transit providers have been able to keep it moving with these renegotiated rates per member per week rates. And that's something that could be in part of the study in these contracted services, is to also bring in how effective and efficient it is to use the same software and scheduling dispatch software for all demand response services, whether it's through Capstone or through VPTA. We certainly want to ensure that we're sharing the calculations as to what we feel is a benefit to the entire system. So we'll continue to provide the information and have those conversations with DEVA. Like you, we feel that it is critical to the overall sustainability of the transit system as it is currently serving the public. Thank you for
Okay, all right, continue on.
So you could just tell Caleb that we're aware of it and
Yeah.
working on it. But he's coming in tomorrow.
Good, so I'll,
Maybe you won't need a separate
You
meeting.
only got 10 more minutes.
so that help, but more for our area up there, I guess, yeah.
So let's get right to the budget with 5 minutes remaining. And as you can see from the white book, shows an increase. It's because we are now capturing and showing the $3 million down below here, the $3 million flex from FHWA funds to the GMT urban budget. In the past, this was like not captured in the public transit budget. It's not our budget, it's GMT's urban, but we are capturing and showing that in the white book now. Overall,
That's not a plat pass-through then. That's direct to them.
yes, it is a direct to them. FTA receives those funds and then they obligate it through their trams work like we do with ours. But overall, we're looking at a small increase of just $56,000, as I've mentioned before, with those remaining COVID dollars. We feel we're in a position now to reassess services coming out of COVID for meeting the needs. All routes are being assessed, and we can look at the route performance report with you at a later date and make those adjustments and really come to the new sustainable dollar figure that we need in out years. For FY24, this current budget allows us to sustain services that are meeting the acceptable thresholds in our route performance report, allows us to continue with our microtransit pilots, and our capital program continues. And this 5.25 million here is what we're projecting we'll receive from our competitive awards associated with the e-buses. It could be more than that, it could be less. It all depends on when these buses are ready to be delivered, and that's when we pay for them. It comes off the books. But overall, state funds at 9 million before COVID, 8 million plus was the normal. We were able to save $5, $6, $7 million during COVID when we were applying the COVID relief funds, but we're now getting to that new normal. So really, We also have an increase in our program administration. We did pull in another FTE to help us manage this program, and that's been a nice capacity boost. I had 4 members in my staff. It's now 5. And so this has really helped us do more. So that's the budget.
We're reinstating the fees in Chittenden County July 1st, I see. You're not opposed to that, are you? That's something you want to see happen.
We're not opposed to it. We have the zero fare study that comprehensively moves through impacts on rural areas versus the urban.
Do we have that study?
Yes, that has been published. I can ensure that that's in your
We've
inbox.
got to have a little something coming, right? We don't charge much, but something.
Is it worth it? I mean, we haven't,
For-
we ought to, at some point, just get a briefing on what that, the
Yeah,
findings
I
from
want
that
to see
study.
that. I really would.
Because I know in some areas,
I oppose the free one.
well, there, in some areas, and
I think we're gonna get a push from DMT that they're gonna push to keep it zero fare because they
there's
said
certain
that,
routes.
well, they said all because the boxes that they have aren't able to collect money.
You're talking about which one?
GMT,
Burlington.
yeah.
Burlington.
And
Even if it's $1 or something, you gotta pay something. You can't, free is nice, but it does cost money.
Have they made that claim to you that they want it to be free?
The Board of Commissioners has voted to, as they accepted their FY24 budget, it included reinstituting fares. And unless they're able to receive $1.9 million, that is the plan for us when we looked at what we were able to accomplish with this rather large state funds. We were comfortable with that decision. It also allows us to remain fare-free in the rural area. And the reason that is because before COVID, 1/3 of those routes in the rural areas were already fare-free, being paid for by resorts or by a town, or Dartmouth Hitchcock comes to mind. And when we look at services in rural areas, we don't have a robust network that allows people to really operate without a car in many instances. Fares 50 cents to $1. It costs us about $420,000 or $450,000 in lost revenues, and that's split between 50-50 federal and state. And so for an extra $200,000 in state funds, we're able to stay fare-free and also work with our locals to amplify that message as they look to continue to receive their funding from the towns. That is a critical part of the overall budget. Doesn't include local funds, but upwards to 10 to 20% in normal years come from the providers themselves. And so working through FY24, as we look at urban reinstituting fares, maintaining fare-free service in rural areas, it'll give us a little bit more time to assess what we want to do in rural areas. If only half of our vehicles need fare boxes, are they going to be used on the right routes? If when we go through the zero fare study, Steve Fauble, who did that study, he's done 3 of them for us in the last 15 years. He is a wealth of knowledge, and we'll bring you through the calculations, but it's more expensive to have zero fare service in the urban area, almost twice as expensive than having per person than having a zero fare in the rural area. And so that is the approach right now, and subject to change. We're just trying to identify impacts.
Is there any area that people can make a donation as they get on the bus? Is that possible now? Because I know Cider, they recommend like $3 sometime. It's recommended. You can't afford it, But I mean, I just wonder, are we encouraging anything?
We encourage local revenues to come through donations, through appropriations, through their town budgets, through town meeting day, those types of things. Each provider in each region has their capital and revenue plan. And that revenue plan is designed to meet up to 20% of their total budget. Some folks like Tri-Valley Transit and Advanced Transit have been very successful in the donation, developing a foundation for those areas. Folks like RCT have been very successful working with their towns to ensure essential services for their residents through $500, starting upwards depending on your population. So there's been different approaches depending on who's in your region and what services are needed. Those resorts do help us significantly in the Mount Snow area, Killington, even in the valley floor, by providing us more than the match potentially, so that we can use those funds for other non-federal match activities. And so it's a hybrid approach throughout the state. Moving to fairs in the urban area did make sense to us through the prism of perspective through this that Zero Fare study.
Okay, that's it. Anything else? Very
Did you, Ross, can you remind me, did we ask you to do that study or you guys were doing it anyway?
That was a legislative directive.
Are you glad we had to do it?
Absolutely,
How much
absolutely.
was it?
That study, I'm not sure. I believe it was around $20,000, and we were using a lot of the same information that we've been doing on previous Fair Fish studies, something that we talk about all the time. And when Advanced Transit went to Zero Fares, they saw a 27% increase in ridership. And so you can't imagine, like, what we see? We had a study before this one that was called How to Improve Usage on our transit system. And this was one of those recommendations. If you wanted more usage, Zero Fares could be a way. But when we instituted that with COVID, it's tough to figure what
I had
that.
zero price on groceries. I'd sell a lot more groceries. I mean, I understand.
You get rid of more
You
groceries.
retire quicker.
That's a no-brainer, right?
You can retire quicker.
If you give
Well,
something
in our
away.
area though, the towns actually say, we
Yeah,
want to
well, they
contribute
should.
and make
They
this a
should.
service to our residents.
I believe in
So
some
it's
charge.
not, well,
Some
they're
places-
saying they will pick up the charge in essence,
Okay, that's fine.
through their town appropriation. And that's how it's presented, the same as for, I don't know, the
Good.
senior meal sites, for example.
But some places it doesn't increase ridership because they're not riding for other reasons, like they
Well, I
just
know
don't,
you come from
it's not convenient.
each in
or-
the Montpelier for $1, that's not overcharging anybody.
That's not the barrier, like it's other. other
This time
barriers.
next week, I'm gonna be an expert on it, because I'm gonna sit down and study, and if I can't, I gotta know more about it.
Okay.
It's nice to
All
see
right.
Caleb be
Thank you.
here tomorrow.
You
Yeah.
might, the study would be helpful.
Yeah.
You're up next.
And then certainly, on the Medicaid, you cannot do that. You cannot balance bill. You
Right.
can't pass. So then you have to distinguish potentially between your passenger type.
Okay, welcome everyone. We're back this morning. All right.
I'm gonna leave it.
And our next topic this morning is finance and administration. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, for the record, just tell us who you are and what you're going to cover this morning.
So for the record, my name is Jana Morse, and I am the Division Director of Finance and Administration with the Agency of Transportation. And I'm going to share my screen so you can see the presentation as well. Slide. I feel like it's so easy when I'm sitting on the side of the room, but the second I get up here, the pressure's on. So with me today, I also have Maureen Parker. She's the Deputy Director of Finance and Administration, and Brad McAvoy was our Facilities Manager, and he'll be testifying for the second portion of this for our Transportation Buildings presentation. So Finance and Administration is one of our really easy budgets to talk about. Most of our detail, I'm sorry about that, can be found in the black book as opposed to the white book. The white book really just has our roll up. And we have this year a budget of $21.9 million. This supports 140 personnel. There's two temporary employees, 127 permanent, and 11 limited service that we were awarded this past July. On the screen, you'll see the funding
You're
profile.
talking about the agency as a whole, or just your?
This is just Finance and Administration Division. Yes. So of the 26 limited service positions that we submitted a request for over the summer, 11 of them came to finance and administration, with one of those being an assistant attorney general that's allocated to AGO, but we support that position.
Do you have any attorneys in the agency?
We don't have any attorneys on our staff. We're fully supported by the Attorney General's office,
Just your, the AOT and just.
the whole agency.
Whole agency.
Yes. We have no attorneys that work specifically for finance and administration.
But for the whole agency,
We do.
because you have the
We have
attorneys
7.
that work just like on the rights of way and
Yes.
all that stuff.
Yes. So our funding profile is primarily transportation fund with a small amount of federal dollars. And then we have a large bulk of our spending profile is on personal services, a little bit on operating, and then we receive a $50,000 grant every year to support civil rights and the National Summer Transportation Institute.
So it's really hard to figure this out, but one would assume that you would have more federal funding, because I would think the administrative work that you do would be cost allocated across to those federally funded sources.
So
So that would, for example, agency has a complex cost allocation formula. And so all that administrative cost gets cost allocated. But that doesn't seem to be the case here, or is it? You know what I'm talking about, Bradley? You're looking like you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Sure.
I'm Bradley Kuchenberger, Chief Financial Officer for the record. We've done a couple of processes in the past few years on how to allocate administrative costs. We, for one fiscal year, it was fiscal year 22, we did what's called an indirect cost rate, in which we bill the flow rate to FHWA. We've since paused that, really because it just reduces our overall federal ability to put projects out into the ground, out of the state infrastructure. But we do have certain staff like contract admin. We have our civil rights unit. We have a few others who do cost allocate their time, just isn't as significant an amount.
Why did it limit your ability to get projects in?
So we were charging, we entered, and we still have a current agreement with the FHWA, we just don't use it, to charge a total rate. So it's on the salaries for
Is it
a
spread out?
project. It's similar. And so when we bill extra for our administrative costs. But what that does is we only get a limited number of apportioned dollars from FHWA. So it reduces that amount of apportioned dollars, and it's, in our opinion, better spent
On project
on
rather than.
projects rather than on project.
I was just looking at, how relative, how you were working that admin
Yeah,
cost relative to, but as long as you're dealing with capped
yeah,
federal sources, it's not as though all you're doing is moving it from one place to another. You aren't generating more money. But I was just wondering whether you did have that cost allocation. Does that include the secretary's salary in your budget?
Yes.
What?
Just one cut.
Oh. You making a motion?
They wanted to cut Secretary Flint's salary.
I did not make that, I thought she was making.
No, I'm not. I was
Trying to
just,
get you in
I was
trouble.
trying to get a sense of, what fell into this particular funding bucket. That's
We'll
all.
talk about that on the next slide, right after this one. So just to give you a little of an idea of where we're at today, this is our year to date for fiscal 23. We're approximately 40% expended. And you can see we're about 50% in salaries and benefits, so we are on par right there. Our contracted third party and other personal services, this is where we want it to be a low number, and we want it to be in the negative, because it means exactly what you were talking about, Senator Kitchell, with us being able to charge back to projects. This is where we recoup some of the federal dollars, and we're able to apply it to our salaries and benefits. So this also includes the services line Also includes our legal, education, and physical health contracts to support our agency. Some of that is cost allocation from the various agencies and departments that we receive services from. Our other purchase services, general operating, property maintenance and rental, those are all on track for where we would expect right now. Some of the invoices we receive in those areas come at the beginning of the year. Some of them come near the end of the fiscal year. So they will all balance out a little bit more as we get closer to May. You'll see slightly higher numbers there. So we are doing good so far, and we've already made our deposit for this year's NSTI program, which is why a bulk of the funds for the grants are expended.
So, but it would be your division that would be overall responsible for all the payments made under the various contracts, projects, all of that is in your shop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all processed primarily through Bradley Buchenberger's office.
Is Bradley part of your shop?
He is.
Oh, good.
So I didn't
even
even
get my org chart here.
I didn't include a slide on how we were made up because you've already seen that in the secretary's opener, but we have a rather large team of disparate services, and we provide all the core functions to the agency. So Maureen is responsible for overseeing our audit, our contract administration, and our hearings unit. And then I have the rest of the team. So I have emergency management, finance, facilities and logistics, which Brad McAvoy leads, our performance and strategic initiatives unit, civil rights, and our technical training or organizational development team. And that's where you see a bulk of these salaries and benefits coming from. So for the coming year, for fiscal 24, this is what we're proposing as our budget. And this year, you'll see a total increase of approximately $2 million in the governor's recommended. Most of that is in salary and benefit increases, a large in part and due to the 11 additional positions we have going into fiscal 24.
Those are not conversions, they're additional, they're new.
They are new limited service positions that we were awarded in July.
Doing what?
That's a good question. So that's across the whole spectrum. So we have a couple that are allocated to finance. We have a couple that are allocated to contract administration. We have 2 that are allocated to performance and strategic initiatives. Their primary focus is looking at the work that we're doing and our processes and finding ways to streamline them so that they better support and allow us to utilize our federal dollars. We also have the Assistant Attorney General, and we added 1 to our civil rights team. Is that it up to 11? And 1 in audit, yes.
So that's a lot of new people. And is it related to the influx of
It
federal
is.
funding that we're anticipating both
Yes.
this year and the 2 years out?
Yes. And we've been measuring our hiring practices for those along the lines with when we expect to see the influx. So we've advertised approximately 50% of those positions, and we have hired a third of them already.
And
Yes, sir.
that personal services subtotal, what is that subtotal? It's not subtotaling those ones above it.
So the personal services subtotal, oops, let me go back one, is looking at the salaries and wages, fringe benefits, third-party
Oh, but not
services,
the
and
top
per diem,
line.
and not the top line. The top line should also be in bold.
I see.
That's our-
I get it.
That's our total. Yes, sorry about that.
No, that's my fault.
So about 91% of our budget this year is for the proposed fiscal 24 is in fixed costs. That includes the secretary's office and any IT infrastructure costs. So you'll see a couple of ups and downs in here. And we also consolidated our facilities payments for our lease payments and supporting expenditures with those from each of the disparate divisions into finance and administration this year as part of one of our limited service positions in performance and strategic initiatives was able to do some analysis and opportunity finding, and we found that that was an area that we could reduce the cost to process our invoices by consolidating them into one area. So, is there room?
Right here, we're gonna be fine.
So salaries and wages and fringe benefits, those are calculated and provided to us, and they're included in the third and fourth line down. All of this area can be found on pages 4 and 5 in your black book in more detail. We are contractually required to provide benefits and workers' comp, and those are the fringe benefits that are provided to us, the costs for those. We have contracts and third-party services, as I mentioned in our current fiscal 23 budget. That's for our legal and educational contracts that our organizational development oversees, as well as services provided by DHR. And then the per diem and other personal services, this is where we capture the amount that we're eligible to be reimbursed by the federal programs for work that our team does to offset our transportation fund costs. Then in our operating subtotal is up about $400,000. That's largely attributable to a $200,000 increase in IT services for infrastructure as a service. As we transition from some of our on-premise servers, we're moving into an Azure cloud environment. ADS is helping us with that transition. We're finding that we're able to cut down on some of our on-prem items, but the cost for infrastructure as a service is going up this year. We also, as I mentioned, are consolidated our maintenance and custodial services, and that attributes to another portion of the cost. Where we're able to have a bit of an offset here is we also backed out the $2 million one-time appropriation for our financial services replacement. And that's a component that we are contributing to the larger ERP or enterprise resource planning project with the Agency of Administration for AOT specific items in our early phases of the project. So requirement solicitation, design, and potentially some of the initial development as well. So that is pretty much all I have to share about our finance and administration budget. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions? Okay,
All
thank you very much.
All right. So I'll do a little quick opener for transportation buildings and then turn it over to Brad McAvoy. So transportation buildings budget also falls under the purview of the Director of Finance and Administration. Brad McAvoy is the administrator, and you'll hear from him in just a minute. So our budget that we've proposed today also includes information about a project that is not funded through the T-Fund, but the St. Albans facility, which we are proposing, the governor has proposed in the governor's recommended budget that goes through the cash fund in the capital bill. So it would be a pass through, and Bradley can explain a little bit more about how that would work if there's questions about it when we get to those slides. And then I do have a little video to share at the end, so I'll probably pop back up here, get that up on the screen and do some narration while Brad takes away the rest of the show. So either forward or back there.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Brad McAvoy, Facility Manager for AOT. We'll go through a few slides here on the transportation buildings budget for this year. So for FY24, we're looking for 1.525 million. The majority of that will be for New Haven and North Hero salt shed replacements. You can also see the 3.5 there that's additional for St. Albans in the capital bill. And the bottom numbers of 325,000 for statewide maintenance. That's in addition to other maintenance pots within aviation section as well as the maintenance section to do small heating projects, light retrofits, other smaller type upgrades.
That's what the statewide heating is. That's not
Statewide heating for 24 is out of that, so some of that statewide heating will fall into that 325. There's also maintenance has a dedicated pot of money as well as rail and aviation.
But the statewide heating, the 217,
That's for 23.
right? And that's just for actual equipment, not
That's for heating.
fuel.
Correct, heating system replacements. So this year we did new outdoor wood boilers at Martin and Eden this year, as well as Middlesex. So that was what was captured out of that.
Little difference in the salt sheds back in the old days than months ago.
Yeah, you'll see the next slide here I'll go to.
What's the Lunenburg?
So Lunenburg was in there for last fiscal year. There was kind of a shift in priority in operating needs to shift that money to St. Albans to get them out of the downtown. We did a couple minor upgrades to Lunenburg to get that through. The need kind of shifted operationally more to St. Albans. So in the salt sheds for FY '24, we'll be looking at replacing New Haven and North Hero. These are a couple of the last Quonset hut style. A lot of the rebar is exposed and rusting, and some of those steel connections are getting in pretty bad shape. So we're looking to replace those two.
You try to replace them with something that's not so susceptible to rust,
Well,
holding salt, or you need
A lot of the
something like that.
details have changed since then. Now it'll be, epoxy rebar. I don't think back when those were built, there was as much spacing and, keeping some rebar away from the outside edge. It'll be a wood construction similar to what our new sheds are built. Over the last 20 years, have changed the design on that. So those are the two pots for the salt sheds.
What is it, the concrete?
Popping, when the rebar gets
What's the word?
cold,
Spalling?
spalling, where it's actually popping pieces of concrete off, falling onto the floor. It's mixing in with our salt. We have to really work with the garages when they get a salt delivery and push the salt in with a loader to make sure it stays away from the edges up high where these connections are.
You don't want a piece of concrete sitting on the highway.
No, they have to be careful. So this next slide is an overview of St. Albans. We are still in preliminary design phase. We just closed on an 18-acre parcel off exit 20 on 89. We just closed on that in late December. We have started preliminary design on this. You can kind of see what the spending profile was. There's the repurposed funds from Lunenburg, as well as a little bit of carry forward, and then the one-time capital bill money for the 3.5. So Lunenburg, it's one of our older garages, and it is cramped. Over the years, we've done smaller upgrades. We converted an upper garage to give them some more space, more heated garage space. We've done some minor upgrades to get them to where they can fully operate out of there. We've upgraded the lighting a little bit. The need and the priority for St. Albans was bigger. That facility's really scattered on that site. It's very tight for the plows. If they get in with a wing, there's not enough room
Plan
there.
to actually do a replacement in Lunenburg and then you.
Lunenburg will fall into out years, maybe where we get pushed into 25 or 26 for replacement. So we are still planning to replace that facility down the road. This is just a kind of a conceptual as you come off route. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with exit 20, but if you turn right, Handy's is there, and just a little ways up there was a large parcel where we were able to carve out an 18-acre piece that's got easy access to Route 207 right there.
Is that on the north end of town? Or is that near where the ice rink is?
No, it's farther, next
It's
exit
the
up.
next exit.
Yeah, next exit
That's
up.
what I thought.
Handy's is there. There's a home center. There's three-phase power right there at the road. So it was a pretty good site overall. This is just kind of a preliminary mock-up of what the site may look like with a garage, salt shed with brine making ability. That is the region that does brine for District 8 for the Northwest. There'll be an office there as well for district staff, technicians, the project managers. So that's what that preliminary mock-up is looking like. Just kind of an elevation view of what the garage would be. We built White River 6-7 years ago, and this will be a similar version of White River. Stock room, garage bays, potential for mechanics down the road. And if there's no questions, or if you have questions in regards to St. Albans, otherwise I'll pass it back, or do you want me to? Okay.
I have a question on St.
Sure.
Albans. What are you proposing for the heating system?
So we're looking at all options. We're looking primarily to go heat pump,
Do what you did in Tunbridge, but on a much bigger.
much
scale?
bigger scale. We're looking at both ground source as well as air to air, and we're also investigating if the outdoor wood boilers that the state has certified at their 400,000 BTU, if we can use wood as well, so we'd have no fossil fuels, period. Primarily, if we have the outdoor wood boiler at a site, we'd have a propane backup or natural gas. We're looking to see if we could go fully renewable. We don't know where that's at yet.
And you have enough cordwood just from clearing, so you would never do pellets because you have that access to the free.
Correct. Yeah, to my knowledge, we've never purchased any cordwood through the state. We did back when the Windsor Prison Farm closed. There was a huge stockpile of
Right, because the prison
cut
used to
split
do
wood there.
it.
correct. So we actually distributed that out statewide to all of our sites at Berg. Would we coordinate that with BGS? That was a big savings on our end, and we didn't have to season and put up a ton of wood, so that was a good.
And I assume these more modern outwood boilers are more efficient, you're burning less wood.
Correct. Yeah, they're gasifier boilers.
And the employees don't mind doing that.
No, it takes, you got to get a couple of good guys trained up and really how to get the feel for how the system works. And once they get up, and we may even look at tying those into a radiant slab. So we've done that at Indians for a garage. So
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you for your time.
This is a really quick video that shows. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. Pull that up. Okay, so what we have is a little kind of demonstration for you today is to show you a little bit about the route from the current garage facility to the interstate and then the proposed future facility to the interstate. And the slide,
The whole city with it.
it'll be very quick. It's going to be the fastest trip through the city you've ever had.
We want to see you go take the snowplow through the double dot.
Yeah.
So we took this opportunity this past Monday to have one of our folks go up and attach the camera to the front of the plow and kind of take you through the route. So as for those of you that are familiar with St. Albans, I'm not as familiar as I could be. It's through a primarily residential, much more trafficked area than what the proposed location is. We're going to travel through multiple stop signs, multiple lights, traffic lights, signals, and past a school through the major downtown area, lots of pedestrian traffic.
And just to add to that, it's not a state route, so the wings are up all the way through.
Right, you're not doing any plowing or any maintenance on
Nope.
the whole route.
So it's a bit of a visibility issue and a safety concern for us as well, that we have this far of a route to travel.
It's a terrible,
to get to-
location.
get to work.
Yeah.
And that's just,
I think right through downtown.
Yeah. So as you can see, that Subaru had to move in order for us to continue through the traveled lane.
Imagine taking plows through the city like that with all the traffic. Oh my God.
And this is just, the reason it was there just the.
Years ago.
100
Been there
years
for a
ago,
very long time.
before a lot of the buildup of that residential.
Yes.
60s, I believe, is when that was developed.
Right next to the existing facility, there's a military complex there, and we've already been in contact with them. They're interested in purchasing, at this time, they're interested in purchasing that location and that land. That land is about 9.5 acres, right? 9.3, give or take.
Yeah, right in that ballpark, 8 to 9 acres.
So we would be able to see a little bit of an offset in recouping some of our
So this is
costs.
still not state highway.
We're
We're almost to the
almost there.
Is that okay?
I start talking and I stop watching the video.
You've seen it before, you know how to.
And this is where the ice rink is on the right.
Yes.
Correct.
I think you said this, but we own the 18 acres now, so we've secured.
Yeah,
We
so-
secured it,
okay.
yep.
That purchase and sale was finalized in December.
And there's no permitting questions, so.
We haven't had any issues with that so far. We're expecting it to go swimming. So now we're on the area that we do perform work on, and it's approximately 10 to 15 minutes with or without traffic and all of the lights.
And a lot of fuel, because you're stopping and starting.
So this is the proposed new location. This is Town Highway 37 currently. We're gonna go through one stop sign and one traffic signal to get onto the highway.
That was them pulling out of.
That was what would be the new driveway
What's there now?
area.
It's just a field.
It's a field. Yeah, a farmed field.
Have to do prime ag mitigation.
I'll let this finish and I can answer that for you.
And here we are entering our,
2 minutes.
yeah. It's like you've seen the last portion of this video already. Approximate time to interstate is 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So to answer that, before we went through the purchase, we did go through with A&R and consultant team. We did do some tests that they can make sure we get perk. We did do a wetland delineation. We've got plenty of buffer and setback. The impacted area for the site is small enough that we're not triggering Act 250. The town of Swanton's actually quite excited to have us up there. We have a meeting with them on the 7th.
This is in the town of Swan.
It's technically just over the St. Albans line. It's technically in town of Swanton. But they're fully on board with us going up there. The town of St. Albans is actually willing to let us tie into their water, even though it extends out of that, so we'll have plenty of water
So
capacity.
you move it to the Swanton Electric District.
I believe we're GMP,
Still do.
they're looking at that now, but we do have 3-phase power right at the end of the drive on 207, so we will bring that in, make sure we
Right.
have plenty of capacity for level 3 charging and
Great.
things of that nature.
Good,
Yeah.
good news.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're very
Appreciate it.
welcome. Thank you for having us in today.